Welcome back to another video. In today's video, I'm going to share with you why I got out of the ATM business. And if you're brand new to my channel, a couple of short years ago, I owned over 100 ATM locations around the country, okay? And we had ATMs in barbershops, we had ATMs in bars, we had ATMs everywhere you could possibly imagine, all the way to, the park and swap, the swap meet. And I'm going to share with you in the video, why I got out, and not only why I got out and my reasoning for getting out, but also the pros and the cons of the ATM industry as a whole. And if you're brand new to my channel, my name is Austin Zaback. I own multiple different companies right now. 3 of them are real estate companies. 1 of them is a VA company, and I no longer own the ATM company at all. But I still get asked all the time, Austin, where do I buy an ATM? How do I find an ATM? What's the best location to put an ATM in? How do I make my profitability higher? How do I not get my ATM stolen? How do I get Wi-Fi on my ATM? How do I run Ethernet to my ATM? There are all these different things that people ask me all the time, and in the video, I'm going to share with you all of that at the end, but right now, I want to share with you why I got out of the industry. So the first reason on why I got out of the industry is I got to a point where I literally felt like it was no longer scalable. Okay, now let me unpack that. What do I mean by that? Because you're watching the video probably and you're like, dude, I just want like 3 ATMs. I want 5 ATMs. I just want to make a little side hustle money, right? You've watched on YouTube, you've scrolled and you've seen all of the people that are talking about passive income and having a side hustle. So let me just kind of unpack what I'm talking about. I personally got to a point where we had so many ATMs nationwide, we were making a set amount of money. And it got to a point where I looked at the industry and I said, man, how am I ever gonna go from making 100 grand a month to $1 million a month? Now, if you're watching right now, you might be like, dude, I don't ever care about making $1 million a month, so whatever, then I encourage you to stay to the end of the video where I actually talk about all the pros and cons of the actual company or industry itself. But for me, I always think really big, right? So when I get into a company or when I get involved in an industry, I think like, man, how do we really scale? Like, how do we get big time, right? And then I also think about the energy it'll take me and the time it'll take me to achieve said result. So when I wake up, I only have so much time in the day, right? And you and me probably have the same amount of time in the day, okay? If you're watching the video, I would imagine you have 86,400 seconds in the day. And that is exactly what I have, okay? So again, I have so much time and I have so much energy. And I have to be very careful that I allocate my time and my energy appropriately on the different businesses that I'm running. And when I got involved in the ATM industry, I had already been in the real estate industry for about 5 years. And real estate was my passion. We were wholesaling and we were making a bunch of money, and I was a real estate agent, and we were doing all these different things in real estate, right? We were flipping houses, and every time I would go to fill an ATM, every time we would go to order ATMs, every time I would get a phone call as it pertained to the ATM company, it was ultimately taking away from my real estate companies. So the ATM industry is about a $20 billion industry, okay? And the real estate industry is a $5 trillion industry, okay? And I actually don't even know that that's accurate, okay? But don't quote me on that. I just looked it up real quick. But what I do know is that real estate is massive, okay? It applies to everybody. Everybody needs somewhere to live, right? So for me, the ATM industry was a $1 billion industry. The real estate was a $1 trillion industry, okay? And without getting into the specifics of exactly how big the market cap was on the ATM versus the real estate, it doesn't really matter, right? For me, real estate was infinitely scalable. The ATM company was not infinitely scalable. And really the last main reason that I got out is it got to a point where it actually was dangerous, okay? So let me kind of unpack what I mean by that. So it got to a point where I had to buy a Prius in order to, drive around and fill up ATMs. Now, in the ATM industry, you can hire what they call somebody to fill your ATM, okay? And they're what we used to call like a cash loader, okay? and you can hire them, but you have to give them a percentage typically of your overall surcharge. So if my surcharge is $4, let's say I'm in a location where my ATM is in a location where my surcharge is $4. And let's just say I have an agreement with that business owner, okay? Just to make it simple, let's just say the business owner is taking $2. So my agreement with the business owner is that I'm gonna put my ATM in their business. I'm gonna manage it, I'm gonna fill it, I'm gonna make sure it never runs out of money, I'm gonna make sure it's always working properly, and they're gonna get $2 every time somebody uses it, and I'm gonna get $2 every time somebody uses it. But then let's just say I decide I don't wanna load that ATM with my own cash because it's too dangerous, and I have to have a Prius, and the banks won't ever give me money, and I've gotta order money to my house, and there's so many things that at scale didn't work. So then in that case, I go and I get a cash loader, right? And now the cash loader says, well, hey, I want $1 of the surcharge. We'll load it with our own cash, we'll take an armored truck out there, we'll do it the right way, but we want $1. So now I own the ATM, but I'm only making $1. And that's where all of a sudden, like, it starts to eat into your margin. So for me, not only was it dangerous, right? Like, I had to go out and fill a lot of our ATMs. I would say at the peak, we were probably personally filling over 50 ATMs every single day or every single week. And it was me and my buddy, and we would drive around in a Prius, and we would fill all the ATMs, and we'd have to order our cash way ahead of time at the bank, and a lot of times they would have to deliver the cash to us. It got to a point where it got very complicated. You know, we would have to go, and we'd have to drive around in our Prius, you know, me and my buddy, and it was dangerous, and it was complicated. I didn't want to take that risk anymore, right? Like, I didn't want to have the risk of having to have, you know, a 9mm or whatever in order to potentially protect myself. And a lot of the time, you know, I'm down, you know, literally on my hands and my knees, you know, filling an ATM, right? And so you had to have another dude with you that was standing backwards, you know, making sure that nobody comes up from behind you, right? And so you're literally risking your life because people are crazy, and at the end of the day, people will do anything for money. Okay, so really quick, I wanna go through the pros and the cons of the ATM industry in 2023. Pros of the ATM industry are, number one, it is passive income, okay? So you put cash in there. Let me take a step back, okay? There's really, in my opinion, no such thing as true passive income, okay? Any type of passive income, you have to put a little bit of work into it, okay? I don't care what anybody says. Even if you have a rental property in real estate, even if you have a property manager, okay? I've got a rental property right now, right? I've got multiple, but I've got a rental property where I feel like lately, every single week, my property manager is reaching out to me and saying, hey, the water heater broke, you know, this happened, you know, that happened, and I've got to reply to him. So although he'll take care of it, I've still got to reply to him. Okay, so look, I don't think that there's any such thing as true passive income, but I will say the pro of the ATM business is it is about as passive as you're gonna get, okay? If you had a loader, okay, you had somebody load the ATM for you, right? And you owned the ATM, okay? You know, you're making money while you're sleeping, you're making money while you're on vacation, you know, you're pretty much making passive income. It's about as passive as you're gonna get. I think, in my opinion, that would be a big pro. Another big pro is the simplicity, okay? It's actually not that complicated of a company to get into or a business to get into, right? You buy an ATM, okay? Step number one, right? You buy an ATM, okay? Pretty simple. They cost about $2,500. You can get a Gen Mega, you can get a High Song. There's a bunch of different ones you can get out there, okay? But $2,500, you can buy an ATM, give or take, okay? You find a location, okay? Again, pretty simple to do at the end of the day. I find somebody that needs an ATM and I offer it to them, right? I sign a contract with them, boom, I've got an ATM, okay? In a nutshell, it's about all there is to it, right? You're gonna put your own cash in, then you put your own cash in, right? If you're gonna get a loader, you get a loader. But as soon as people start using the ATM, you will literally start making money. Now, obviously, you have to set up the ATM, you know, you've gotta, you know, hook it up to a servicer. You've gotta figure out if you're gonna, you know, do the Ethernet or the Wi-Fi. There's a bunch of little stuff, but don't overcomplicate it, okay? It's all very, very, very simple. And to me, that was a big pro when I initially got into that business. So at the end of the day, there's probably a bunch of pros that you can think of if you're in the industry or you're looking to get into the industry. Really, the main ones I can think of are their passive income. You can make pretty good money. It's a great side hustle, a great way to make like additional income in my opinion. And then obviously it's really simple to do, right? It's not that complicated at all actually. But in my opinion, there are more cons than there are pros. And I know if you're still watching the video, then you waited the whole video to watch the cons. And really, this goes back to to why I got out of the industry, but I'm gonna share with you some additional cons on top of that. And if you haven't already, I would greatly appreciate if you'd do me a massive favor and smash the like button for the YouTube algorithm. Also, subscribe if you have not already. And I'm trying to make these videos, moving forward as relatable as I possibly can. Hopefully you enjoy the video, but drop down in the comment section below if you enjoy the video. Okay, so one of the biggest cons that I could think of, which could be a pro or a con, it really depends on how you look at it, is the fact that you have to go buy the machine. Again, like we talked about when we were talking about the pros, yeah, they're only $2,500. But you might look at that as a con. It could technically cost you a bunch of money, right? And if you can't find a cash loader to load your ATM for you, or there's not enough margin in the overall surcharge to be able to afford to pay a cash loader, then you will have to load it with your own cash. Now, the beautiful thing about the ATM business is that when you put your cash in there, you're not actually spending that money technically, but you are just parking cash, right? Which could be argued as a total con. The reason for that is like, if I have like 20 grand, let's just say, in my bank, okay? I could take that money and put it into the stock market, or I could put it into real estate, or I could put it into cryptocurrency or wherever, and I could probably make, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10% on that money, and potentially even more. If I go put that in an ATM, then that cash is now tied up in that ATM. And I'm only gonna make what I was already gonna make on that ATM anyways. But it really just boils down to what your goal is, okay? So, if you want 5 ATMs that each make you $1,000 a month in net profit, and you wanna make 5 grand a month, okay? You wanna make, 60 grand a year from 5 ATMs, then you just have to do the math. It's gonna cost me $12,500 to buy 5 ATMs. If I'm gonna load them all with my own cash, and let's just say each one I've gotta put 20 grand a month into it. Let's just say hypothetically, I gotta put 20 grand a month in that ATM to refill it. Yeah, you're just gonna get the 20 grand right back when people use it in your bank account, but it's still tied up, right? So now I've got $112,500 tied up in 5 ATMs, right? I've got $12,500 to buy them, and then I've got $20,000 per ATM times 5, which is 100 grand. So it costed me $112,500, right, to get into the industry. Well, if I'm only making $1,000 a month per ATM in net profit, it's gonna take me almost 2 years to see my money back, right, to get an ROI, which is actually really good if you think about it, okay? 2 years to make all your money back is actually not that bad, but you have to do the math, right? You have to really think about it. And I think that could be a con, is that it does technically take a decent amount of cash depending on how you do it. So if you want to get into the ATM industry, you actually do have to pass a background check, and they call it the SOF, which is the source of funds, and they will run you through a background check and make sure you're not a felon. Obviously, there's ways around that, I would imagine, right? If you have a significant other, you have a spouse, you have a wife, I'm sure that there is a way around that, but I definitely felt like it might be worth mentioning as a potential con. Okay, another really big con that I think a lot of people run into, it's probably the biggest thing that I get, is how do you find a good location? I feel like a lot of people struggle with it, okay? I haven't made an ATM video in a really long time. The last time I made an ATM video, I feel like was like 2018 or 19. And to this day, I still get a lot of people that reach out and they're like, Austin, how in the heck do I find a good location? And, on one hand, I feel like it's actually pretty simple, but on the other hand, I do feel like it's actually pretty difficult. So let me kind of elaborate, okay? The problem is that the best locations have the most foot traffic and the most amount of people who pay cash. An example of that obviously would be like a medical marijuana dispensary. Another good example might be like a barber shop. Another good example might be like a bar. There's a bunch of good examples of that. We had a bunch of ATMs actually here in Phoenix, Arizona at a park and swap, okay? So we had a big swap meet where they would meet up, I'm sure you're familiar, and we had every ATM at the park and swap, okay? And we would go through like 300 or 400 grand in like a month, okay? It was pretty ridiculous. That's obviously great because literally everybody was using cash. But getting that account, we got pretty lucky. It took knowing the right person to get that account because obviously they had been around forever. They had a ton of other ATM, owners that, ran that location, right? Getting in was not easy. I don't know that we could have done it any other way than just knowing the right people. So depending on where you live, what'll end up happening if you decide to get into the industry is that, you're gonna be going and initially looking for people who don't already have an ATM in their location. And that can be really tough because if people don't already have an ATM in their location, then they're probably brand new, right? So they're a brand new barber, they're a brand new bar, a brand new dispensary, they're a brand new something, and they don't have a location, which means they also don't have any data. And if they don't have any data, then how do you know it'll actually be a good location, right? You have no idea how many times we would put an ATM in a location. We thought it was gonna be great, right? We're like, oh my God, we can't believe we got that location, you know, and we would order the ATM, we'd take the ATM out there, we'd bolt it to the ground, and we would get it all set up, right? We would get the Wi-Fi hooked up or the Ethernet hooked up, we'd load it full of cash, we'd program the ATM, a month would go by, right? And we would check, you know, online in our back office, and, you know, the location would do, you know, 3 transactions. Unfortunately, some of the best locations out there, you know, already have an ATM. You know, and I made a video about this, you know, on my Instagram or my TikTok recently, and I was talking about, you know, one methodology of going about the ATM industry is to buy a pre-existing portfolio. You know, there's a lot of older people in the ATM industry. You know, there's a lot of people, like one of my mentors in the industry, you know, he's an older guy. He's got a ton of locations, and one day he'll retire. Kind of guy where when he retires, like he let somebody else kind of take over. Maybe you probably have to buy him out. He wants to like help the next guy. And a lot of mentors are like that. You know, when people get older, you know, they want a mentee, you know, they want a protege, right? They want somebody that they can help get to where they're at. So a really good way for you to break into the industry, right? Because this is a big con, you know, getting a good location. A good way for you to potentially break in might be to actually go ahead and find, you know, somebody who already owns, you know, 5 or 10 ATMs. There's already a ton of data, right? You already know exactly how much money they make on average. You could look, you know, at a 2-year, at a trailing 12, or look at, you know, trailing 24 or whatever, and look at all of that history of the locations, right? And you'll know, you know, are they increasing? Are they decreasing? Are they staying steady? You know, what months are the biggest months? How many transactions are typically happening, right? And you can really understand what you're getting yourself into. So again, you know, the other way you can go about it is if there's a location that already has an ATM, you know, you can go and try to negotiate a better deal. And we've done that before, right? I literally have walked in, you have no idea how many times, you know, me and my partner be driving down the road, right? And I'd see a bar, and I'd be like, dude, we should get an ATM in that location right there, right? And we'd pull over real quick, and I'd run in there, and I'd be like, hey, I want to talk to the owner. And, you know, sometimes the owner would happen to be there, and other times they'd be like, oh, the owner's not here, but here's his card, or here's his information, right? And I'd either talk to him there, or I would call him, and I'd say, hey, you know, I see you have an ATM. You know, talk to me about the numbers. And what that really meant was like, how much surcharge are you charging? And then how much are you, the owner of the business, getting per surcharge, okay, per transaction, right? And I would ask them, and they would say, oh, you know, we're getting paid $1 right now. And I'd be like, okay, well, what if I could pay you $2? They'd either say yeah or no, right? But it is definitely an option. Sometimes they would say, you know, I'd love to do that, but we're locked into a contract. Okay, no problem. Well, let me do this. Let me see if I can negotiate with your current ATM guy, and if not, no harm, no foul. Why don't you give me his number, right? And the guy would give me his number, and I'd call the owner of that ATM company, and I'd say, hey, what would it take for me to get your ATM the hell out of here? And they'd tell me, they'd be like, dude, you know, for $5,000, we'll walk. 10 grand, we'll walk. I would literally pay him off. I'd be like, dude, I'll pay you 10 grand right now. Come get your freaking ATM and get the heck out of Dodge. And then I'd put my ATM in there, you know, and I'd sign a 5-year contract with the guy. So now I'm locked in, right? So for me, I was just playing chess, not checkers. You know, that to me is a big con, right? You know, we live in a very saturated economy where there's already obviously an ATM probably in a lot of the good locations, and you really have to put a lot of thought into that, and you really have to get creative, okay? So if you're watching the video, you know, I would say the main thing that I would do if I was getting into the industry right now is I would get real creative. Like, you can't just be like everybody else out there, you know, with a plain old Jane contract and a plain old Jane attitude and a plain old Jane everything, right? Like, it ain't gonna work for you. You've got to get creative, and you've got to get out there, and you've got to hustle. Okay, I'm happy to make more videos. You know, I just wanted to kind of make a follow-up video to all of the questions that I'm always getting asked about the ATM company and why I got out of the industry, okay? So I hope that in the video I answered answered a question of yours. If you haven't already, I would greatly appreciate it. It'd mean the world to me if you would subscribe, if you would like the video. Also, go check out my podcast, okay, if you haven't already. We're interviewing really cool people over there, and I'll put that video right here, okay, so definitely go check that out, and that would mean the world to me. And also, drop in the comments down below if you want me to make another video on the ATM industry. I'd be happy to, and we'll see you in the next video.